Hi, and welcome back to another installment of our live editions here on entp Life. Here on this channel, I mostly talk about real estate investing, business, and my personal, passions. And one of those passions is really to develop a portfolio of international properties that I could use as Airbnb rentals and also use as my own residence as I travel through the world in my favorite cities. So far, I have a property in, two properties in Musameli, Sicily, and I'm in the process of negotiating my second location in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, particularly in the Cabo Frio section of Rio de Janeiro. So I went down to Brazil. I fell in love with that country back in 2019. I really think it's one of those underrated countries for people who haven't traveled there. Most people who have traveled to Brazil will turn around and tell you Brazil is freaking awesome, and it's one of the world's best countries. But people who haven't lived there oftentimes are kind of put off by some of the stigmas that may be associated with the country, poverty, and the things that come along with that, like crime and other social injustices, especially between men and women. So, you know, I travel pretty extensively, and Brazil was one of those countries that I just didn't visit. I always thought about going there for a carnival because that's one of the things that they celebrate. At least one of the major tourist travel weeks would be the week of Carnival. And I just never got around to it, just like I've never been to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. But I ended up going there for a trip with my buddies. We take an annual trip to a new country. None of us had been to Brazil, and we thought, hey, maybe this might be the country for that particular year. That was back in January 2019. Fast forward, here we are looking at properties. I went to Rio de Janeiro to kind of capture this entire experience. I started out in Sao Paulo, then I went to Rio. I prefer Rio, the state of Rio, over Sao Paulo. Because I'm kind of over the mega city scene. I wouldn't be interested in living in Mexico City. I've already moved out of New York City. I would go there for tourism related things, but to live, it's just not the pace that I want anymore. Sao Paulo is a big city, really spread out, like over 20 million people. And I'm more of a coastal beach life type of person, salt life type of guy. So I like to be near the coast, and I like to be in areas that are scenic and areas where people are great. And Rio kind of has all of those things. So I was looking first in the Copacabana section. We toured Leblon, Ipanema, the main Copacabana region. I also went to Barra da Tijuca and the islands right off of Barra da Tijuca, and Santa Teresa in like Rio de Janeiro city proper. But then I went a little further. I went to Cabo Frio, which is another kind of small city, right maybe about 2 hours northeast of Rio de Janeiro. And then Buzios, which is about another 45 minutes or so beyond Cabo Frio. Buzios is known to be somewhat of a luxurious neighborhood. It's kind of a more upper class vacation destination, at least that's how the Brazilians see it. And it has this huge population of Argentinian expats and business owners. So it really draws a huge Argentinian audience, really. So when you're in Buzios, you'll hear a lot of people speaking Spanish, and you hear a lot of people speaking Portuguese. And the reason for that is typically they're speaking Spanish. You're either going to, most likely, high probability, going to be from Argentina. Sometimes we have visitors from Chile, Peru, but it seems that Buzios is really frequented by Argentinians. However that shaped up is just the way that it is. Out of the three areas, I feel that Rio de Janeiro is a huge city, developed properly as far as like tourism is concerned. So you're going to have more options there as far as housing options, as far as neighborhoods to live in, different vibe in general, and the range is pretty wide. So for those of you who want options, who want that big city feel, obviously then pick the place in Rio de Janeiro. For those of you who want to be a little off the beaten path, Cabo Frio and Buzios are for you. So for me, I was really kind of looking to narrow down either a cool property in Rio de Janeiro proper. I still want to do something maybe in Santa Teresa if I could get one of those abandoned townhouses. And I'm looking at land development in Cabo Frio. But for this conversation, we're going to be talking about Buzios a little more in detail. So Buzios itself is like a peninsula, right? So it kind of shoots out. So it's water on three sides. It's got a ton of little like cove beaches, and the waters are pretty calm there. So for just kind of relaxing and kind of swimming and enjoying the water, it's a pretty good pace because the water is calm. So you're not going to have to worry about getting tossed up by waves or getting pulled out. In certain areas in Cabo Frio, the water can be a little rough, which may be good for surfers and for people who enjoy that. But if you just want to kind of veg out at the beach, then Buzios might be the better location. Also, Buzios has like it's built kind of for tourists. It's got like this sort of feel to just come here, relax, unwind. It's not a city like Cabo Frio, which is going to have normal city things. It seems to just be a getaway place. So as far as living there full time, I would personally, I feel like I was in a bubble or in a fake world if I lived in Buzios full time. And Cabo Frio seems to be like the midpoint, like for someone like me. Buzios itself, I would say the prices on property are more expensive. It attracts an upper middle class to wealthy audience because you have to remember someone who's making $2,000 or $3,000 a month in Brazil is considered, kind of upper middle class, and I don't think they could quite afford to buy in the main section of Buzios. There was one property that I covered that was kind of like on the outskirts where they're starting to develop outward from the main area. So I could see people who are upper middle moving there, but I think someone who has 300 to 500,000 US dollars disposable to buy a weekend house is not going to be the upper middle class. That's going to be part of the wealthy class of of Brazil. So that's who really owns those properties there, and it's kind of reflected in the styling of the city and the audience that's there. So if you're looking to spend a little more, maybe you want to be kind of in a more exclusive neighborhood, as far as a vacation town is concerned, then Buzios, I would say, is for you. I can't remember the name of the restaurant that I featured, but it was in a posada right next door to my Airbnb. And the restaurant was really nice. Awesome views, which I didn't film, unfortunately. Overlooking the bay, nighttime views right on the cliff, really nice. And there's a lot of smaller posadas. The posadas are like, best way of describing them, they're like bed and breakfasts in a way. So they're kind of like a hostel meets a private house, where maybe kind of mini suites are rented out or bedrooms are rented out. And there's a higher level of service, usually a restaurant or some sort of service component to that posada. So they're larger properties. Like I said, think of your classic bed and breakfast. They're kind of that sort of setup. So there's a lot of those sprinkled about, and they could be pretty good investment opportunities, as most people who are Brazilian will stay in posadas versus like Airbnb rentals or vacation rentals. That isn't really a thing down there just yet. People are more inclined to pay a lower price for a room or a suite in a posada than they are to rent out a whole house, right? Because the value proposition is there, and at the end of the day, it's still people who are earning in reais and maybe are paying closer attention to their bottom line. Hey, hello everybody. I'm sorry that it just going off that way. So, Belinda, hello, how are you? Rob, what's going on? I'm glad you're making progress with Musameli. Travel Jones, if they put feet on the ground, it would change their mind. Exactly. That's once you get to Brazil, there's a certain magic there, especially if you go to Rio de Janeiro. You have this huge stretch of beach. The beaches are nice. I wouldn't say they're like Bahamas nice or like the best beaches in the world, but blue water, good sand quality, decent water quality, but huge, lots of activity, lots of action on those beaches, and they go on for miles. And then out of nowhere, you're just encased by these mountains. It reminds me of the Philippines. It reminds me of Thailand or the Pacific Islands, where volcanoes kind of jet out and created the land masses. But it's so funky over there. But it feels amazing. Once you set foot there, there's a certain like vibrance or beat to the culture that I don't know. It's just special. So let me see what else. Got my codice fiscale. Awesome. Had lived in Europe many years in my early 20s. Super excited about buying property in Italy. I'm glad you are as well. S. Fisher. What's going on, Sheldon? Just talking about Buzios, Brazil. I don't think you haven't visited Buzios. When we went, we only went. Sheldon was one of my buddies who came with me on the first voyage, and he just went back. He was in Sao Paolo. I think what did you do? 10 days over there? And he came back, downloaded Pimsleur, and is learning the language, because it's one of those places that you're not going to get by with Spanish. Most Brazilians aren't Spanish speakers. Most Brazilians aren't English speakers. So trying to navigate not knowing English, you can make happen. I mean, not knowing Portuguese, but you really feel a little alienated. And the people are so willing to engage with you, but you just can't, because you can't say anything. So it's kind of like, oh, well, you just get stuck. So for people who are serious about traveling there or living there, they automatically start picking up the language. You don't know how many people that I've met so far who when I talk about visiting Brazil or whatever, they start learning the language, because you kind of get pulled in, like, no, I have to learn this language if I want to really participate in this culture. Duolingo, I don't like Duolingo personally. I use the application Pimsleur to learn languages. It's 30-minute lessons with like reading lessons as well as verbal exercises and written exercises, all on the app. Duolingo is kind of pieces together words, and kind of small phrases. Pimsleur, on the other hand, is all conversation driven. And from the very first lesson, they just drop a conversation on you, and you obviously don't know what the hell that conversation's about. They deconstruct that conversation in a few different ways, and by the end of the first lesson, when you hear that conversation again, you understand all of its parts. You're able to repeat and answer, and you start to immediately feel like you're learning. With Duolingo, it's kind of like, all right, the dog, the milk, the dad, the boy, and it's like, how am I going to have a conversation with milk, dog, boy, dad? It just doesn't happen that way. I know people who've used Duolingo to study. For me, it just didn't work. I think it might be good for like add-on vocabulary maybe, but the way that I need to learn a language, I need like structure, and I need like, especially with the Romance languages, I need to learn how to properly conjugate the verbs, understand tense, and that's just how I instruct the language in my mind. So I need like formal training. Yeah, man. When you're there, like you were just like, when you know the language, things change. People talk to you differently. People like, I've made so many friends in Brazil, taxi drivers, bartenders, people, bouncers at clubs. Once they see that you could talk a little bit, they want to, like, first of all, when an American comes there, the average American just defaults to, man, I'm on vacation. Everybody's going to have to learn how to speak English. I'm the tourist. But there's not that many Americans that are truly visiting in numbers, like compared to Mexico or Cancun or something like that, right? So the people are kind of like, yeah, well, you're in my country, so speak my language. Almost like Americans would when tourists come. It's like, yo, you're in America, dude. Speak English while you're visiting. They're not gonna whip out their French or their Russian or their Greek to accommodate these tourists. They're just gonna hit them with the English and hope they understand. And if they understand and that person has a richer experience, you're like, oh, you speak, and your English is good enough, and it allows you to have that engagement. So it's the same in Brazil. The people just speak Portuguese. And Brazil is their country. They're not trying to accommodate the gringo. But if you do speak the language, then they're willing to show you everything that is Brazil. They're willing. You're a nice person. You're genuinely interested. If you're an American, they usually have a family member in a bigger city, either Miami, New York, or they've been there. And they're going to want to engage you. They're going to want to kind of share with you. They like the ultimate indicator of a Brazilian being interested in you as a human being and wanting to befriend you is to either go to the beach with you, grab a drink with you, or invite you to a weekend barbecue at the crib. And obviously the weekend barbecue at the house is a higher level because they actually that's family day, right? That's family time. So if they want you to be around the people that matter to them the most, it's because they really want you to feel welcomed. And that's going to be very difficult if you don't speak the language, because you're going to just be sitting there like, what are these people saying? I can't joke around with them. You'll just be stuck. So, learning the language really opens the doors for you to just really embrace the culture fully. There should be a link under this video for Pimsleur. If you sign up, I get like a $20 gift card, but it's $30 a month. So think about it, $1 per lesson. And right now I'm learning Spanish on it. I've already done my first 30 days. And my Spanish, I had like a lot of words just from being American and kind of learning Spanish passively. But I'm able to kind of communicate just a little bit better to kind of say, hey, what am I going to do today? And I want something. I think I believe. I know that after I get through the next 30, I'll be far more expressive in Spanish. And then the next 30, I'll be at the level that I am in Portuguese. I think because I've gone and practiced enough, I've had enough. Maybe I'm a little bit beyond the first 90 days of Pimsleur for Portuguese, but I know what to expect out of Pimsleur in 30 days, 90 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And by 90 days, man, you'll be surprised how much you can communicate. You still have some gaps, but you'll be able to express yourself properly. You'll be able to talk a little bit about what you believe, a little bit of politics, a little bit about your work life, what you enjoy to do, what you want to do, what you would like to try. So, if you have 90 days, just commuting, best way to use Pimsleur is driving to and from work. You got a half-hour commute, turn it on your Bluetooth, do the lesson as you're driving. It's not going to distract you because you're not looking at text. It's listening and repeating. Do the same lesson on the way back. And then 15 minutes before you go to bed, go through the actual user interface and visuals of the app to read the language, practice what you've retained. So you get 2 lessons in one day. You hold that information fairly well. Or if you're exercising, let's just say you go on a morning walk, rather than listening to music, do the app. You'll walk, you'll burn calories, you'll learn the language. And that goes, that I started taking Pimsleur for Italian. I stopped because I was like, I'm not going to Italy anytime soon until they open the borders. But once I am in the routine of going there again, I'll kind of whip up my Pimsleur. So whatever, especially as an English speaker, whatever language you're looking to pick up will be on there. Chinese, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian. The offerings from English to other languages are just far superior. So I would definitely check that out. And it's not just from a salesmanship perspective. It's an app that I really believe in and use, and I recommend it to everybody. If Sheldon, I don't know if you could chime in and say you should be on like lesson number 5 or 6 by now. So if you could chime in and tell me what you're thinking about your progress. Yeah. What city are you thinking about heading back to, and what sort of place? Because I have some contacts there now that I could introduce you to so that they could kind of get you set up, whether it's an apartment, you know what I mean? Like you could get a place. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend buying like I am. It's strange I'm saying that, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend outright buying. But if you're going to spend 3 months, 6 months, rent something, get a feel for where you want to be, and then commit to a purchase if you are going to buy something. Udemy. I've never tried that one. I'm going to check it out. Very much so. You remember when you took your nephew down there? Cool. He was complaining about not being able to read the menu at the restaurant and yelled, "I'm American. It should be in English." Yeah, that's the freaking American mentality I can't stand. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And they're gonna look at you like, I don't know, dude, but you're in Brazil. So, and yeah, and it's not going to be about the resort life or anything like that. Funny story is in French, chicken is poule, right? Or poulet. And in Spanish is pollo. In Italian, I believe it's pollo. In Portuguese, it's franga, right? So if you're looking at a menu and carne or carne, you'd be like, okay, that's meat, that's beef. It's the same in Spanish if you have some Spanish exposure. But franga throws you off completely because you're like, what the hell is a franga? You're like, is that a fish? Is that what is that? But so certain things are completely off in Portuguese compared to the other Romance languages. So, when you're looking at a menu, man, certain things you'll pick out like vino and that sort of stuff. Like there's certain things that are pretty straightforward, but you're not going to know the local dishes. Do you know the Airbnb rules in Brazil as far as your ability to rent? From what I've seen, I think there's really not an issue. You may, if you rent to rent, for instance, like you do a rent to rent, you're probably going to have some resistance there. But when I've stayed in Airbnb, I've only stayed in Airbnbs in Brazil. Every time that I've checked in, the front desk man has been the one who's managing the keys. Similar to like in Colombia, that happens a lot. So usually they're either getting paid or they're okay with it and nobody's really complaining. It's like, it's better that this is monetized and tourists are here than they are trying to shun people out of that. It's, Brazil tends to be kind of welcoming to economic opportunity and deregulation, at least with this administration, than they are with like trying to minimize free enterprise. So I haven't noticed anything, and I haven't researched it either. I'm kind of especially when it comes to a lot of things, I kind of do first and then react afterwards. That's it. You're looking at Salvador. I've never been there. I've heard good things for most people. Tanya Bazemore. Hey, there's so many other language programs. So why Pimsleur? I may have answered this, but Pimsleur specifically is 30 minutes of language. So it's literally you have a conversation in the beginning and each conversation builds on itself. And then you have pronunciation practice, word pairing practice, mock conversations, and it keeps building on itself. Then you have the visual portion where you could read, learn how to pronounce the words properly, the vowel pairing, how does that all play out? Flashcards, games, it has everything for me that works well. Any other language app that I've ever used historically, I never stuck with. Pimsleur is one that I stuck with and actually got value out of it. So that's why. Ronell asks you about connectivity on IG. Can you talk about it here? I just got a fully remote role and I'm considering relocating to Brazil for a few months as I save to buy a property. I didn't get an answer for you just yet because most of the places that I have stayed have had crappy internet. I'm not sure what the average internet speed is or who the top provider is, but some of the places have really had bad connectivity. But then again, it's a 200 million person city, and some of the cities are well developed. So I think it might be, what people are willing to pay for their internet more, like as far as a host is concerned, than it is what's available. What sort of internet speeds do you need for your line of work? You're studying documentary making on Udemy. Okay, cool. Frango. Or franga. I'm not sure what I said. True. Yeah. So mas means two different things from Portuguese to Spanish. Exactly. So mas in Spanish is more, and mas in Portuguese is but. So yeah, completely different things. So like even when I'm learning Spanish, sometimes if I want to say but, it's pero, and I'll automatically think mas, right? And then there's mais, which is more. So mais is more, mas is but in Portuguese. So you have things like that. I asked you about connectivity. Okay, that's a repeat. Okay, cool. Fluent Forever has a 6-month subscription for really. Fluent Forever, and how is that program structured? I might have to look that up. I only need enough speed for video and email. I spent 2 weeks between Rio and SP and didn't. Okay, sorry. I only need speed for video and email. I spent 2 weeks between Rio and Sao Paolo and didn't really do any work. But a photog was telling me she had a hard time with upload speeds. That's possible. Like I said, it's really up to the service provider and what you're willing to pay. If you're just traveling about, right, you're going to be at the mercy of what the host or what the owner of the hotel is willing to provide. There's so many places in the world that I go to that the internet is trash, and it's sometimes it's where the property is located that it may not be near fiber or even cable, right? Because personally I think 50 megabytes is, or even 20 megabytes and more is sufficient for most people's usage. 10 down, 20 down, 10 up, in most cases will do you just fine. But in some of these places, man, I swear it might be like 5 megabytes down, 1 megabyte up, and that's just unacceptable. And then you'll turn around and you'll have better Wi-Fi performance. Like, if you actually got like your 4G set up and your 4G linked to your device would perform better than, hardwired internet there. So it's kind of dicey. I think if I were you, I would ask a local who's there. Is anybody in here from Brazil? I think I'm going to try to ask Yusuf Wateef what his thoughts are on internet and what internet provider he uses, and I'll try to circle back in maybe like in like a community post or something like that. So I'll ask Patricia, the real estate agent that I'm working with, what to expect as far as internet speeds are concerned. I only got a few more minutes here because I fly up to the Northeast to check out a few companies that are for sale. Pretty cool meeting tomorrow, meeting with a private equity partner, and we're going to be evaluating a pretty sizable deal. It's a $19 million home health care company in in the Northeast that we're looking to buy. And if all goes well, it'd be a nice addition and a nice start to the platform that we're building out. Philip Ross, welcome to the show and thank you for the feedback. Rob Roman, good night. Pleasure. Let me know what's going on. Once you've settled on a few different properties, I'd love to see which ones you're picking in Musameli and how close they are to mine. And then when you're ready to start talking to the contractor or you need someone to kind of start giving you bids, just let me know and I'll put you in contact with Luca, who's doing my work. So have a good night. Victoria Maria Rodriguez de Souza. Hello, Carl. I'm from Rio, and I believe I could suggest places in Buzios you could still buy a land and build with some local architects or builders. Yes. I'm going to put my email address here. Send me your information. I put it right down below, Victoria, or Victoria, and Victoria. Is it Victoria or Vich? How would you say your T? You're not going to tell me, but I wonder how you pronounce the Victoria. Victoria. So, yeah. So, muy obrigado. Mi irmão. De nada. Carl, have you went back to the okay? So, yeah, so one of the properties I looked at was they built 4 smaller cottages on it. It was just outside of like the main center. But yeah, I would love to see what's available because right now my property that I'm looking at in Cabo Frio that I have an accepted offer on, it's right, maybe 50, not 50. Yeah, maybe 50 meters from the beach, in a nice little quiet section over there. Tanya, Carl, have you went back to the property in Brazil where the dog chased after me? The exterior was interesting. What street was that on? I don't know what the name of the street is. It's actually a common street where the trolley stops by and there's like a bakery, a panaderia, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it's. Yeah, I think it's the same in Portuguese. And that's what's happening to me now with Spanish. I'm mixing the two, unfortunately. There's a bakery and it's actually seems pretty touristic in that section because I've gone down that street more than once, but I just don't know the name of it. And there's more properties like that in Santa Teresa that are just abandoned all over. So I'm trying to get an attorney to kind of research those properties and what would be the process of trying to reclaim them or get them sold to us by the government or something. Because I think that would make a pretty cool project. Like even that bakery that was busy was right next door to that property where the dog was, and the upper 2 levels were completely bombed out. So somebody owns that building. Somebody's renting out the ground level and feels that the building was good enough to not collapse on itself and occupy and provide space for the storefront. So what are they doing about the upstairs? Why aren't they renovating that into apartments? Beats me. And there's a lot of properties like that. So I think there's some potential. But if you're gonna look, it's Santa Teresa or Santa Teresa, and that's that overall neighborhood has like that historical feel and a lot of dilapidated properties, and you'll see a lot of like newly renovated properties there too, and kind of creative types. Like you see the stamp of them there, like the graffiti, the wall murals, and that sort of thing. You see the way people are dressing. You see it's kind of starting to have somewhat of a boho scene, and usually that leads to change. All right, be well. Damien, space, grow your company, become that billionaire you want to be. I'm not sure what you mean by that. But anyway, all right, guys, that's it for tonight. I got an early morning flight. Gonna cut it short. So once again, thank you for joining me here tonight. If you're gonna try to learn a language, I suggest Pimsleur. If you have any other suggestions or you know anybody that can benefit from watching these lives, anyone that you know that's interested in moving to Brazil or Italy or anything that I'm covering, make sure you share ENTP Life with them. If you're not already subscribed and you just stumbled upon this live, hit that subscription button. I put out videos twice a week, once on Sundays, which is more of my produced style video, a little more interesting in the edits and the look and feel. And then on Wednesdays, you get to look at this face. So, and have a real time kind of conversation. Areas that I'm competent: real estate investing, home healthcare staffing, software development. And then, the list kind of goes on from there. And when I'm able to kind of consult and give advice, I will do it right here on these lives. So if you've had questions about some of the material that I covered that you need me to expand on, if I have that information, I will expand on it. And that's really the best way to get some feedback from me. So these lives are about giving back to the community, engaging, getting to know people, seeing their stories evolve. And that's what we're here to do. You're a teacher, and Portuguese is one of the most hardest languages in the world. Not even Brazilian people are able to speak it properly. I don't know. I actually feel more comfortable learning Portuguese than I do Spanish, because in Portuguese, there's less like connecting words. It's a little more direct, like somewhat like English, where, sentence structure there's not a lot of extra fluff. So it's more direct. I don't know. I don't think it's so bad. I think for people who may have issues with kind of like the nasal R or nasal sounds, may struggle with that part, depending on what region and what area you're learning in. But I don't know. I think Portuguese is a cool language, and if you're giving it time, you will learn it. But thank you again. Have a good night. Be well. I'll catch you on Sunday.